Hi, this is Bruce Rawles, and once again I'm speaking with Susan Dugan about A Course in Miracles. And today we thought we'd talk about true appreciation, true gratitude, and what that means in terms of A Course in Miracles and the non-dual metaphysics of that thought system. And so anyway, do you have any things you'd like to start off with, Susan? Any announcements or anything?
No, not really. I'm sort of in a holding pattern in my life with with our house being on the market and being sort of not able to make a lot of plans. So I'm not really at the moment doing any workshops or anything like that. But so yeah, do you have announcements or?
I think the only one since we've last talked perhaps might be that the Miracle Share Conference that was scheduled for this month actually has been postponed to January, and we'll have updates on that on the appropriate websites when that's available. Still in process. So I think that's about it for now for me. So anyway.
Okay.
You
Sounds
want
good.
to just dive into appreciation?
Yeah. Well, do you want to introduce the idea because you sort of were, it was on your mind, I think.
Yeah. I oftentimes when I catch myself thinking about, it's usually in the context of what it isn't, because the Course in Miracles is so much about looking at what the world's misunderstanding is and correcting that. As Ken Wapnick says, it's not a course about doing, it's about undoing. It's the not know instead of the yes. That because we don't need to affirm what we truly are, we just need to get what we put in the way out of the way. And with the help of the Holy Spirit, our AKA Jesus of the Course, or our inner kindness teacher, or whatever label we want to put at it. But it seems like the true appreciation, the true gratitude, is contrasted by the world's gratitude, which is usually a comparative, kind of like a relief sort of thing of, well, gee, and it's always sort of like a sort of Damocles kind of thing where, at least for a certain time or for a short while, things seem to be okay, and I can afford to be grateful for, some calamity or some catastrophe or some mishap not being yeah, we've avoided, just narrowly missed sometimes, but there seemed to be a lull in the storm or whatever metaphor we want, but that's usually an opportunity to look at what true gratitude is. And there's nothing wrong with being grateful or appreciative of when things seem to be going right in the world, but of course miracles would remind us that those are just reflections of a choice in the mind, and it always asks us to get back to the mind and to the cause being our choice of one of two thought systems always, and our decision-making faculty being the operative hand metaphoric on the toggle switch that goes back and forth between the sane and insane thought systems. And in the sane mode, we basically are grateful for no particular reason, because the gratitude and the appreciation we feel, and the true respect and admiration of everyone and everything, is not conditional. It's not limited to things seeming to go a certain way for Bruce's benefit or Susan's benefit or whoever's benefit, or not going to the way of our individual detriment kind of thing, only because we're so fixated as egos on all the things that seem to be big deals that impact our individual lives, instead of stepping back and looking at the scope of where we can see things from a much loftier perspective, where it's not about the specific thing happening or not happening. And from that perspective, we can afford to be truly grateful for everything that happens or doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I mean, I think when we think of the world's gratitude, is always about, as you're saying, the kind of the giving to get of the ego thought system, that I'm grateful that I'm getting my needs met, or I'm grateful that I have enough money, or I'm grateful that I got chosen for this job over someone else, or
Right.
I mean, it always involves one or the other, because within the world of form, that's a fact. I mean, that is the way we set it up. But and we are conditional on, you know, our gratitude. You know, we believe that we that if we become right-minded, we may believe that we will then be able to get whatever we want in the world. I mean, there's also a sort of like forgiveness to destroy idea in there of, you know, if I do the course right, then my life will go beautifully and I won't have any problems, and I'll have a peaceful life in form. And that's never what the course is really talking about. It's talking about, you know, at the level of the mind, that I can be peaceful and in touch with the love that we are, that includes everyone, no matter what's going on in my life. And that's like a whole, you know, different um, orientation completely from anything in the world. And the other thing that struck me in what you were saying is that the world's forgiveness is so based on comparison, you know, and I mean, we do this all the time. We compare ourselves in good ways and bad ways with others, and to make ourselves feel better. And, you know, we feel superior to others, you know, in the example of, I got this job over someone else, or they picked me, right? You know, so we're grateful for something that really, you know, or I think of someone, you know, the example of a great sports figure, you know, praying for to get the home run, or the you know, the touchdown or something like that. And you know, but that's always implicit in that is that someone has to lose, right? And I mean, there's nothing wrong with wanting, you know, something to go your way, but our investment in it, you know, the being, what the course is asking us to look at, how we need to notice how we're grateful for, you know, for me. It's always about me. And then also conversely, how the way we do it in a negative way, where, you know, we hear stories from our friends and or on the news, or about horrible things happening to people, and so we say, well, you know, I dodged it this time, you know, my life isn't quite that bad. And you hear people say that sort of thing all the time. You know, it's I was with a friend of mine yesterday, and she's going through some tough physical things. And you know, and another thing, I was driving her to a doctor's appointment yesterday, and she told me that she had to go back in the hospital last week, which I didn't even know about. And, you know, so I'm like, that really sucks. You know, that's terrible. I'm so sad. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. And you know, she said something which is a very typical response that we all might make, which was, well, at least I don't have cancer, or at least I don't have, you know, and we do that kind of without even thinking. We all do it. And so, but that's part of this idea of the gratitude to get, you might call it, of the course. You know, the gratitude that's based on comparing ourselves with others. That's a dualistic gratitude, and is again dependent on form. You know, it's all about whether I get my needs met in the world, and if things go right for me in the world. And somehow we've turned that whole idea into our very worthiness. You know, our worthiness is reflected somehow and we can misunderstand the course and think that our worthiness is somehow, as a course student, is somehow affirmed by things going right in the world. You know, well, it must be because I'm choosing a good script, or I'm choosing, you know, I must be right-minded or something. And that's not at all what the course is saying. I mean, the world, you know, the scripts do what the scripts do. All of these were written long ago, and we're playing out every, you know, fragments of every scenario of what specialness, of what the idea of separation from God, of individuality might look like. And within all of those individual lives, there's ups and downs, and there's good things and bad things. And some scripts seem more catastrophic than others, but none of them end all that well. You know, nobody gets out of them alive, right? And so we're really, you know, it's to our benefit to see that as long as we're dependent on the world of form, we, you know, we've placed our bet on a pretty fragile piece, you know, and it can't ever really end. And if we're placing our need for love on outside of us, it will never be filled, because the, you know, it is a defense against love, that there is an outside, that there is a, you know, that all these forms exist in the first place, that we had to project that idea of guilt in the mind over believing we really did separate from that undifferentiated union. We had to project that out there and follow that idea into the form of, eventually a body, that now is completely vulnerable, and it needs to have all of its conditions met to be happy, to be healthy, to continue to exist as a body. And and it has to be in competition with every other body on some level that we're completely unaware of, for relative innocence, because that's the only thing that makes the state that we've set up bearable in truth.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
everything you're saying just kind of reminds me of the idea that in the course that it's so much about forgiveness and noticing the things that we object to as individuals, and how that becomes our classroom. I know I keep coming back to one of my favorite ideas that Ken Wapnick talks about, is basically referring to Freud's, referencing the unconscious mind, and particularly dreams as the royal road to the unconscious, and how A Course in Miracles extends the idea of dreaming from the nocturnal dream to the daytime dream, because it says all of your time is spent in dreaming, and how that dreaming that we do is really the opportunity to look at the things that we're upset about. And so everything that seems to be an annoyance or an irritation, or from the most minor thing to the most terrifying or depressing or whatever, and everything in between, those are all opportunities to see where we've invested, as you were talking about earlier, in an identity that is, designed to make us, to keep us miserable. And when we look at the insanity of that objectively and see how crazy that is, this morning I posted a quote that I just happened to think of, from Alice in Wonderland, of, where the Cheshire, I said a Cheshire cat, or anyway, one of the characters in Alice in Wonderland is maybe it was Mad Hat, I don't know. Anyway, they're saying, I don't want to go among mad people, Alice says, and says, well, the one replies, well, we're all mad here. That's why we came here. And
Right.
and that's the thing that A Course in Miracles asks us to look at, and to get back to our mind, we need to just really gently look at, like you were saying earlier, how we've all been wrong in seeing the universe and the world that we live in as being cause. And we've forgotten that it's an effect. It's basically a reflection of a choice we made to try to run away from the decision-making faculty in our mind, and to use the world as a massive cover-up, a massive, propaganda machine and a smokescreen to avoid looking at the contents of our mind. But that's where our real salvation lies. That's where our only hope is. To quote the stars, it's our only hope, we want is to look at the mind and see that that's where we can choose, maybe covered over with a lot of stuff, but there's that switch. Maybe we haven't used it as much as we could, but there's that switch amid all the rubble of our world, ever ready to be able to be switched over to the position of true gratitude, which allows us to see everything is either an expression of love or a call for love, and including, just say at a random, recent political events, or recent family situations, recent things going on in our bodies, in our economy, in our just pick any subject that seems to be near and dear to us human characters' lives, and those are all perfect classrooms for us to forgive and to look at the contents of our mind, and just slowly but surely tick off instead of making those things contingencies that guarantee our unhappiness. We can uncheck them and undo ego's script that says you have to have all these things lined up just right in order to be happy, and we can start unchecking those things on our little mental website, and until there's nothing that's preventing us from entering a place of peace. Whereas the ego strategy is to always make sure there's something. There always has to be something that is keeping us from being peaceful, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the idea of gratitude again is it changes for us. You know, when we come to the Course, it should be, if we're practicing what the Course is saying, if we're practicing true forgiveness, which is really the questioning of every value that we hold, the questioning of every reaction that we experience, you know, which is, I mean, the process of forgiveness is really when I find myself upset, angered, depressed, anxious as a result of something outside me, you know, to really remind myself that, you know, I'm not upset for the reason I think. Lesson 5. Maybe I'm wrong about what I'm reacting to, because the Course is always consistent that the cause is never about what I think it is. It's not about what I'm projecting it on. It's a choice that I first made in the mind to side once again with or to reinforce, you know, usually I've already chosen the ego as my teacher, but to reinforce the guilt and make the idea of guilt real in my mind over the belief that I separated from God, only to try to find someone else to blame it on. And so in that way, to distance myself from that guilt. And so we're always, you know, driven to feel victimized by political forces, by you know, in our special relationships in our personal lives, what, you know, in all sorts of ways. And so really the gratitude that we're beginning to learn is a growing, it stems from that growing practice of discovering that peace comes when I see that I'm wrong about what the cause of my problem is, and that nothing outside my mind can take my peace away. I have another part of my mind, another teacher in my mind, Jesus, Holy Spirit, that, you know, that sees everyone, victims and victimizers, as the same, and never, you know, is completely unfettered by anything that's happening outside the mind, because he knows that it's all made up, and he knows that you know, not one note in heaven's song was missed. And so so the gratitude comes from a growing experience of how I feel when I remember that I'm wrong about, you know, that victims and victimizers are all fighting that, whoever I've chosen to play those roles at the time, and see myself as victimized as a result, that in truth we're the same, because we're, you know, the other side sees themselves as victimized as well, and me as the victimizer, or my people as the victimizer, my group as the victimizer. But we're all, the reason that we're acting out in that way is absolutely the same. And that's the only thing that we really have in common here in the dream. And you know, and what we really, the deeper need of every heart is to try to find our way home. You know, to wake up from this dream and remember that we're all included in love. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. When you mentioned other, it kind of triggered for me a recollection of a video I watched recently that really kind of hit me between the eyes as a really fun video. And this is slightly nerdy, but Microsoft, and I know other companies are doing this kind of research, has developed a quantum computing system where in regular computers you have a bit, which is a 1 or a 0. It's
Right.
basically a true or a false state, and now the quantum computing bit is called a qubit, and it contains information as well, but in a kind of more abstract way. I don't really understand it, and it's kind of boggling, but basically data can be stored in a qubit, just as it's a quantum computing cell, if you will, just like a regular bit in a computer is a binary digit. This is a quantum bit or a qubit. So in the lab, they've made these, you know, multiple sets of qubits, and they've even got a programming language. And one of the commands in their programming language is called teleport. Star Trek, anyone? And
yeah.
what this does is it actually synchronizes one qubit's data with another qubit's data. So and this has already been known for decades after quantum theory was developed. It was called quantum entanglement, which basically said if you have an electron and it has an axis of spin and it's paired with another electron, its axis of spin is always the same. So that if you change the axis of spin of one electron, the other one doesn't have a lag. It just
Right.
it changes instantaneously. Now this is a practical application where now they're actually using it to transfer, to synchronize data, which means you could actually communicate to someone. And this is what's boggling. Not only across the room or across the country or across the planet, but across the entire universe, because this is quantum entanglement applied in a pragmatic way. That means that you could have a qubit on this planet and another qubit in a galaxy on the other side of what we think of as our physical solar system, and the data would instantly be communicated, not through anything electromagnetic, not through any means that we understand, but because of an intrinsic sameness or oneness or something. Now,
Yeah.
that's where I kind of gets boggling, and that's where, to me, now the physics jumps in and rattles the cage of the metaphysics in our mind, because it's saying, wait a minute, how could that be possible if space and time are real? Well, what if, as our beloved A Course in Miracles
Right.
suggests, and mystical teachings through the millennia, as well as all kinds of now things in modern physics, are saying that maybe we should question that. And so
Right.
we have other ways to remember that we can afford to be grateful for others, because there really is no other. It's all just the other is just a misinterpretation. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I mean, really, there is no form outside the mind, but there is that sort of reflection in that idea
Mhm.
of quantum physics and I'm certainly not the, more about this than I do,
Well,
but
I'm just a novice at quantum physics, but I thought,
finding
yeah.
in cellular biology and all of the, what's being discovered, it's reflected in the world, in the sense that we do affect each other. We
Right,
affect each
right.
other physically, and we affect each other emotionally, and in all those ways. And that's, you don't really have to study that for a long time to know that. I mean, you just have to live with people, right?
Right, right.
We know that we affect each other,
Hmm.
and so I guess the idea is really learning. We're always trying to learn. I think Ken Wapnick said more than any other thing. Well, I mean, there's many things that he said quite a few times, because we needed the repetition. But one thing that stands out for me and always comes back is him saying that victims, and watch yourself, watch how you're always siding with the victim and identifying with whoever you've chosen the victim to be,
Hmm.
but you have no empathy at all for the victimizer. They're damned and can go to hell. And so those times when that arises in our classroom, whatever the other, our particular personal self that we've crafted with the opinions that we have, and the way we've set our personality up, whatever's going to trigger us, that other that is doing something that we find unacceptable, and we will either feel that they're doing it directly to us, or we'll identify with the person that we think is being harmed, or the people or the group that we think is being harmed as a result. And it might as well be us, because we're so identified with that, and we're so not, we're so trying to dissociate ourselves from the other side and say, it's not our fault. You're the perpetrators. You're the awful ones, and we're ready to really damn them to hell in that moment, and it can last a lot longer than a moment, but in our anger and our righteousness, we're digging in and saying God is gone. And what we really did separate from God, and now we're at war to prove some relative innocence. And it's my group that's the innocent one. I mean, look at what you've done. And it, of course, each side feels just as justified, and it's all nonsense. I mean, when we become right-minded, we see that everybody here, again, is a victim when they've chosen the ego of the ego thought system. And it's harrowing when we've chosen that. I mean, I always bring up lesson 182, but which is, I will be still an instant and go home, or let me be still an instant and go home. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's really that idea of that we're all alien, frightened children here that seem to be lost, cast out of heaven in this terrifying, assaulting world, at peril at every turn, and not welcome back home. I mean, we're lost, we're abandoned, and everyone that comes here, quote unquote, comes here, imagines themselves here, born into a body, is that same child. And who we see as the monsters vary, but the reason that we see monsters is always the same. And I mean, it's in all of our best interests to I mean, if we wish to find peace, if we wish to ever feel loved and loving again, to have that awareness, that we're wrong, that we're wrong. And when we take that first step, I notice more and more that the second step, which is lesson 34, I could see peace instead of this. The peace is always there. It's just being masked by my temper tantrum at any given moment and my choice for the ego. And so as soon as I catch myself and am willing to, and that, depending on my particular Pandora's box of horrors, how my hierarchy of illusions, where I've placed this, it may take me longer than other times, but once that awareness, that shift is made, and I am willing to say, well, I'm wrong, and I might have to live with that I'm wrong for quite a while before I feel the shift, but there will be a shift, and the shift is always, it's so welcome, because it's not a trying to make myself intellectually grasp that we're the same. It's an experience of we're the same. It's usually, for me, it's an experience that begins somewhere with that idea that we're that same frightened child, and then gives rise to the awareness that we're all trying to find our way home, and we all deserve to find our way home. We're not the terrible reactive beings that we've set ourselves up to, that are vulnerable at every turn to these ups and downs of such a perilous life here in the world, and in a perilously at risk constantly body. I mean, bodies are very vulnerable, and that's the way we set it up, so that we, to keep us riveted on protecting ourselves, and forgetting that the real protection and safety is in the mind, and has nothing to do with any of this. So when we do, the gratitude comes from, for me, from the idea of learning that this is what my life is really about, is this classroom of learning what true forgiveness is, and allowing these blocks to my my awareness of the love that's there for all of us, and our same need to find our way home, to begin to be more paramount for me, and to have the rest of it recede. Just, it's in importance, and it doesn't mean we don't go back and forth, but over time we become more tolerant. We spend more time aware that we're wrong, and it's it's something I'm grateful for.
Exactly. Yeah. And every person that enters our life, every situation then becomes a way, if we're paying attention, to get back to the mind, seeing everything as either an expression of love or a call for love. And then we can watch crazy stuff on TV, or under our own roof, or out in the community, or the world at large, and wherever and whenever and whatever. The particulars no longer become the big deal, but
Exactly.
the only thing that becomes the apparent, like you say, I like that adjective, paramount. Of paramount importance is what position do we have this the switch in our mindset to, and
Right.
is it of the forgiveness classroom or is it the condemning classroom? And
Right.
we immediately know what kind of results we're going to get, ahead of time with the position on the switch. So
Right. Yes. And we become grateful for our teacher. And as we were saying earlier before we started recording, that there is sometimes even an awareness that our teacher's grateful for our willingness too. And the course actually says that quite a bit. It's hard for us to accept the love of our teacher, so we kind of miss that. But there is that. We're really developing an intimacy with our inner teacher through this practice. And he tells us that there's great gratitude for our willingness to do what is fearful for us, but that really will, save us thousands, all of us, all minds, thousands and thousands of years, as he's always telling us, as if time really matters. But in our experience, it will save us time and pain. And it does, it works from that perspective.
yeah, and that
So,
comes, like you say, from practice and being receptive to
yeah,
the how we're feeling at every moment, how what thoughts are going through our mind, and just paying attention. I think that one of the wonderful it sounds kind of crazy to say it this way, one of the wonderful uh, qualities of A Course in Miracles is that it points out to us how miserable we really are when we follow the ego's curriculum. And not
yes,
that, and as Ken points out, I think in fact, in his commentary on lesson 182, is that the point is not to make us more miserable, but the point us to show us how miserable we have been, and be honest about that in order to use that as leverage to choose against the thought system that's made us miserable, and choose against the condemnation that keeps us enslaved, and away from the peace that we could be having more and more frequently. And as you say, the more we practice it, the easier it becomes, and the more we realize that we are resonating with, in a quantum way, perhaps,
right.
and with the idea that we're all, and it's not just isolated little pieces. It's really everything, but we haven't extended and extrapolated and generalized it yet to include everyone, and that's part of the process, I think, but recognizing that we're all feeling the same gratitude, and it's not like somebody has a special kind of gratitude.
Oh,
It's when we feel that, we really are tuned into not only everyone in the cosmos, but
our true
the entire, um, what we call the sonship, including the great masters who've gone before us, that as we think of them in this world, that have led the way. And why wouldn't that be true? Because we're automatically connected to everyone in truth, and we're all joined in spirit through the mind. Um, and then we recognize that that's the only way it's going to ever work, because, like of course, as bodies, only appear to join, but there really isn't even any physical joining. It's just an apparition that we've made into these very complex and elaborate special relationships. But when we look at them objectively, we realize, the mileage that we're actually getting out of all the specialness that we've, whether it's special love or special hate, has really never worked for us, and it's been completely ineffective.
And we're freed from that, really, the imprisonment of the idea of me.
Mhm.
The ego is just the part of our minds that loves being me, or loves to hate being me, or it doesn't matter how we spin it. Loves to hate being, another me. But the idea that we are, personal selves.
Mhm.
And really, that's what's imprisoning us, because
Yeah,
that's true. We're an undifferentiated union. And there's a paragraph in lesson 195 that I thought I might read as a way of concluding. Is that
sure.
sound
Oh, perfect,
okay?
perfect. Yeah.
Paragraph 4, and I just love this.
Mm-hmm.
And lesson 195 is love is the way I walk in gratitude. And paragraph 4 says, you do not offer God your gratitude because your brother is more slave than you, nor could you sanely be enraged if he seems freer. Love makes no comparisons, and gratitude can only be sincere if it be joined to love. we offer thanks to God our Father that in us all things will find their freedom. It will never be that some are loosed while others still are bound, for who can bargain in the name of love? And there's no need for bargains with God. We are love, we are what we're seeking and believe we threw away, and it's a lie. So, yeah.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Susan. I always enjoy our conversations, and I'll post this on Forays and Forgiveness, your website, and acimblog.com, and looking forward to the next conversation. So,
Thanks, Bruce. Always a pleasure.